Memoir 44 is a wargame, but it's not a historical wargame. It makes no pretensions to simulation, so shouldn't really be judged by that standard. And it's not a miniatures wargame, it just uses fancy counters. For those unfamiliar, it's a simple wargame based loosely on a set of games called Command and Colours, originally intended to depict pre-gunpowder ancient battles. Command and Colours gets its inspiration from a variety of places. There have been abstracted card-based wargames before, and there are some very obvious comparisons between Memoir 44 and the 1985 game Sirocco. There is also, via Command and Colours, some influence of DBA, particularly the abstract command and control system, where you're able to move only a small subsection of your force on each turn. In Memoir 44, that is achieved through command cards. Each player has a hand of command cards. Usually those command cards allow a player to give an order to 1, 2 or 3 units in the left, right or centre sections of the battlefield. As I said, the idea of card-driven play is not new to board games, and the idea of limited orders has proven to be a useful tool for historical wargamers designers working with ancient warfare. But as you can imagine, pasting these disparate elements onto a World War II theme does not lead to any sort of depiction of actual World War II battles. Having said which, if you accept that the game is effectively just a nonsense confection, in the same way that, say, Carcassonne is a nonsense confection in regard to medieval city planning, or an abstraction like, say, Go, it does have a big strength. It is one of those games with a large player base, and it is easily accessible. I played the game a little in its hard copy when it first came out, but some time ago it went into development on Board Game Arena. I did briefly play it in beta, but just before the end of last year it started up as a proper full game you could play, and I've been playing it regularly since then. This is not a Magic, poker or chess level of player base, but it's well above the standard of most hex and counter wargames, even ones with only pasted on themes. In fact, it has been popular enough there is already an existing published strategy guide for the game. And I've talked before about how a player base can elevate a game. Unconditional surrender, which I've done quite a few videos on, is not the best hex and counter treatment of World War II. But its implementation with rules enforcement on Board Game Arena probably does elevate it to that level. But, as regular viewers will know, this is not a review channel. It's a channel about strategy and tactics. And so for my first episode, I want to talk about the basic strategic dynamic of Memoir 44. And I'm only going to cover enough of the rules and interface to help make sense of that. Let's start with the interface on Board Game Arena. When a game ends, you will see the final situation, and to the left of that is a game results tab. If you click on that, it will bring up some basic stats about the game. The first half of that is details of the winner or loser in each scenario and the various tiebreakers, medals won, figures eliminated, etc. The second half of the table is a record of the number of dice that were rolled and what the results were. That is a very standard thing on Board Game Arena, but this is the only time I've ever encountered where it's actually useful. This is the dice section for a game blown up. The first thing to note is that certain rolls of the dice are just better than other rolls. The dice have 5 different symbols on them. The infantry symbol appears twice. Grenades always result in an enemy casualty, so are objectively the best roll you can get. Infantry and armour symbols only inflict casualties on infantry and armour respectively. Flags force units to retreat, which is only situationally helpful, and can turn into a casualty if the unit has no retreat. Stars are, with a few very small number of exceptions, essentially just a miss. And that means you can take a case like this and see if one side was luckier than the other. In this case, the second player got 5 fewer grenades and 2 more stars and flags, so definitely had the worst of the rolls. That's still not the topic for today. Today I want to point out, using that data, a very consistent pattern which points to the underlying strategic dynamic in Memoir 44. Just to reiterate how the victory conditions work. In each scenario, the first player to reach a certain number of points, referred to as medals, wins the game. In the board game arena user interface, the medals are recorded on the left hand side, above and below the table view. In almost all cases, a medal is awarded for destroying an enemy unit. In general, board game arena games are played as a match, with both players playing once with each side. If both players win a game, then the number of medals is used as a tiebreaker, and if those are equal, the number of figures that were eliminated. But here I want to focus on data from 10 matches in which the same player won both games. So here's the collected data, and the number is the number of dice more rolled by the player who won both games. And you can see the player who won both games always rolled more dice. The amount varies, but usually it's quite a substantial amount more. In one case, it's nearly 50% more. And yeah, Memoir 44 really is that simple. If you roll more dice than the other player, you are going to win. Why? Well, dice convert into medals. Take the most basic scenario, firing a 4-strong infantry unit without any terrain effects. Each die has a 1 in 2 chance to eliminate a figure, and if 4 figures are eliminated, the unit is destroyed and a medal is earned. So, talking in terms of expected results, what happens on average, every 8 dice you roll will earn 1 medal. Now, that number can vary depending on how many figures are in the unit you're firing on, what type of unit it is, whether it has a retreat space, and so on. You only have a 1 in 6 chance of hitting an artillery piece. A historical absurdity, but I did say this is not a historical wargame. So even though artillery pieces usually only have 2 figures, you would still expect to have to roll 12 dice for every artillery unit eliminated. 9 for a typical armour unit. There are tactical differences on top of that. An infantry unit with no retreat, only going to take 4 to 5 rolls, and so on. But the point is that these numbers are all quite close together. There isn't a huge amount in the game that shifts the odds really significantly. So if you roll more dice means you kill more units, and more units killed means you earn more medals and you win. So given the previous discussion, what should the Axis player do in this situation? The left assault card would allow them to activate 1 unit that can fire, the artillery piece. That would give them 2 dice. Not enough to actually kill an enemy unit. The artillery bombardment card would allow the same piece to fire twice. 4 dice, so definitely better. But the counter-attack will duplicate a 2 center probe. That would allow both infantry units to be activated and brought to bear at point blank range, generating potentially 6 dice. It's easy to say, no, that's a bad idea. That's going to get that single infantry unit that you're pushing into combat killed. It is, if the opponent gets to the next turn. But, and that's what happened in this game, with 6 dice, there's a very good chance the opponent isn't going to get to the next turn. And more importantly, if the opponent has a centre card, they're going to get 3 dice on that unit, even in the bunker. They will kill the unit, a 7 in 8 chance. And then your best result will be a 4-3 win. And a centre play on that turn will then only generate 3 dice, not 6. So here, this is quite a straightforward situation. You've got a method over the next turn of generating 10 dice. And if you do that, rather than playing your cards in an order that will only generate 5 dice, you are much more likely to win the game. I've mentioned before in these videos that strategy is not the starting point of getting better at a game. The first component in improving at any game is internalising rules, not tactics or strategy. And I don't just mean learning them, I mean fully internalising how the rules work so that you no longer need to spend mental effort recalling them. And to illustrate just how difficult that is, here is chess grandmaster Wesley So explaining how in an international competition he had not fully internalised how castling works, and it got him back rank mated.
Gave a check, and it never happened to me before, but I just assume you can block with the rook. I think some other players thought the same, I think Magnus thought the same. But apparently you can't do it because my king hasn't moved yet, so I thought you could just block it. But it's unchecked. So
the second step, and the one that makes the biggest difference in almost any game, is tactics. Learning and then internalising specific, repeatable tactical plays. Again, so that they become second nature. And third is the rote learning, opening and endgame learning. But only at the very end, the icing on the cake, is strategy, the overall dynamic of the game. The last thing you really need to learn, and something that will generally only improve your play once you've got a solid amount of the other three. So in a sense, in this video I've started in an odd place. And something is sometimes useful in any game when you first start out to understand something of the strategic dynamic drives these other earlier things that you need to learn in order to kind of frame them properly in your head. But if I do another video on this, I'll definitely come back to something much more basic on the tactics. For now, here endeth the lesson.